let's do some hot takeaways and we'll get to more of the film. Hot takeaway number one, this whole season, Andrew, now hinges on the tender hamstring of a 34-year-old cornerback named Stephon Gilmore.
Oh boy, that was a tough one. And that was a tough game to lose him too. And that's a good takeaway to start off with. I don't think that's too hot. I don't think that's too spicy. I think it's just right because Stephon Gilmore is so important to what they do. He was somebody who was covering Marvin Harrison Jr. very well to start that game. And then all of a sudden, when he's out, you notice how quickly Kyler Murray and the Cardinals coaching staff notice it. They start targeting Fabian Moreau, his replacement, ad nauseum, get 2 defensive pass interference penalties, get the touchdown in the second half to Marvin Harrison Jr. Gilmore, for what he does, and credit to the Vikings, because it's December. It was December 1st in that game, and he gets banged up. So this is around the time of year you'd expect it, but they kept him relatively low mileage up to this point by playing a lot of zone, not asking him to run with receivers very often. That changed this game. They went into this game saying, we need to play more man-to-man coverage. We're going to ask our secondary to run, which is why they built in seemingly some rest time for Harrison Smith for the first time since September. He said after the game, I'm not injured. I was telling people close to me, like, hey, don't worry if I'm out of the game. I'm not injured. This was all planned. So he got taken out of the game even while Stephon Gilmore was hobbled as well. It just showed their commitment to trying to keep those guys fresh, but it got Gilmore seemingly injured. He's running so much, his left hamstring gives out. And if this is not a short-term deal, if he can't come back right away, you're going to face Kirk Cousins trying to bounce back against, off of his really bad performance last week, trying to bounce back with a really talented offense coming into town. And then obviously the stretch run with the Packers, Seahawks, and Lions at the very end. So, yeah, they need him. They need him especially for the playoffs. The only good thing is that they've built up such a lead at 10-2. If you got to sit him and be conservative with him, you might as well do it and just make sure that you've got a healthy version of him come January.
Yeah, especially if it gets to the point where you feel like you can't catch Detroit if you lose a game or two here. You're going to be in the playoffs. You're going to be a road wild card team in that scenario. I mean, there's still very much a chance to catch Detroit at this point, just based on, hey, if Detroit loses to the Packers on Thursday night, the Vikings could be tied with Detroit by the end of the weekend. So not giving up on that, but you're right. They've got to be smart about him, kind of weigh the balance of where he's at versus, when it's most important to have him on the field. Number 2, Andrew, of the hot takeaways. Let's get to that right now. I would blitz the Vikings up the middle on pretty much every passing down. Is that too much to ask for a defense to do that? Because I feel like they are so susceptible right now to that almost the Mike Zimmer double A gap blitz. They just get overwhelmed pretty easily, whether it's the protection schemes or Darnold. They don't adapt to the up the middle pressure very well.
Yeah, it's probably more Sam Darnold than anything. I think Garrett Bradbury's generally been pretty good at identifying these things. I talked to Brian O'Neill after the game, and you're probably referencing too. There was specifically a 3rd and 4 in the first half where it was a cover 0 and everyone came up the middle, and there was no preparation for this. And Brian O'Neill after the game said they got good coaches too. So I think part of it was this offense was not prepared for those kind of pressures in those moments. It was 3rd and 4 midfield at that moment. They did not seem like they were looking or trying to bait them into showing their hand in pressures. If you anticipate a blitz happy team, which the Cardinals generally have not been, you're going to try and hard count them. You're going to try and get them to show their hand, or at least add some kind of hesitation to your offense that gets them to show. And they didn't do that in that moment. Clearly they weren't expecting it. So I think part of it was getting out coached. I wouldn't put it all on the interior line, although they remain an easy punching bag because they're not the best interior line. Bradbury especially. Bradbury, I think, had some rough moments in this game that after a rough November through the AFC South, you got to wonder if his future goes beyond this year in Minnesota or much longer. I just think that personnel-wise, they got to look into upgrading some of these pieces. But I did think, too, a couple of those 3rd down sacks in the first half were on Darnold. Like, Darnold has a free runner off the edge. He's got to throw hot, as they say, which just means you need to recognize that there's nobody that can block this person. They're bringing more than we can. You need to get rid of the ball as the quarterback. And then there was the first one he took. There was just a 4-man rush, and he got spooked off Cam Robinson chasing his guy out the back, and he probably thought he might get the ball hit in terms of like a forced fumble or strip sack or something behind him. So he just runs when he doesn't need to. I do think that Darnold is a part of this. He's not totally absolvent of blame here. But in general, I can't disagree that this interior line is not the best in the NFL.
Well, and there was a play, I remember seeing the replay. I'm not sure which of the sacks it was, but they showed blitz on one side, but then bailed out, went and doubled Jefferson and brought it from the other side. And Blake Brandel sitting there blocking nobody, and Darnold gets smoked.
Yeah, that was in the second half. You're totally right. There was one where Brandel just did not adjust, and he's not. When you try to take a 6'4" college tackle and make him a guard, and the whole point of that, or part of the point, was to get more size in the middle. It was to help push. It was to help create running lanes. But when you do that, you don't have a guy that can move very well. So he doesn't adjust to stunts very well. He's late to movement like that. And then when you ask him to run block, like they do all these guys, he doesn't get to the second level very well to linebackers. There was multiple times where their runs were chased down or perimeter throws were chased down because he wasn't getting to that next level, nor Reisner was. So they've got limitations. You're right. A lot of limitations on that interior line.
Last hot takeaway is actually spinning towards next week. I think Kirk Cousins gets mostly cheers in the introductions on Sunday because Twitter, social media is not real life. I think he'll get mostly cheers. What do you think?
Did you? So what was it like on the broadcast? Could you hear it all, or did they talk at all about in stadium? They showed a replay of, I think it was Kirk Cousins' pick 6 for the Falcons that he threw to the Chargers last week, and the crowd was cheering it. Like they were cheering Kirk Cousins' demise already. And this was like, I think this was a part of the game where there wasn't much to cheer for the Vikings. So maybe they were just looking for something to root on, but I don't know. I think there's enough kind of, you chose them over us, which if you're paying attention and you're a fan,
which isn't true.
No,
it's not true.
It absolutely is true. Yeah, it is.
They didn't want him. They were so happy he left. That's me.
Mike, where are you getting that from, Mike?
I don't think they wanted to keep him. I don't think they wanted to keep Kirk Cousins. I don't think they wanted him.
Facts still matter. There was an offer on the table for him to come back.
There was an offer on the table.
Come on, what are we doing on the
table?
Like they wanted to sign him at the right price point. But maybe they set that price point knowing he was going to walk away. You could say that. You could say that it was a disingenuous offer.
Yes,
it was so low. They thought there's no way he's going to take it. He'll get better. Right. That could be the case. Certainly.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But at the same time, if there was no other suitor, if Atlanta didn't pay more, he would have come back. And it was that close because apparently there seemed to be no other team other than Atlanta that wanted him. I think Vikings fans, whether you think they didn't want him or not, Vikings fans are going to have that kind of jadedness of like, you were playing well when you got hurt here and you chose to leave for the money, which he did. And immediately he's seeing it not totally work out for him. So I do think there's some reap what you sow from Vikings fans there.
I think it'll be interesting. The reaction will be interesting at the very least. And I should point out, which I think I've pointed out at least once already, Kirk Cousins now leads the NFL in interceptions and fumbles going into Sunday's game. So
yikes.
Not great for Kirk right now. If you've been riding the Darnold roller coaster, I think Darnold has 10 interceptions and 7 fumbles this year. I think Kirk has 13 interceptions and 12 fumbles. So you don't necessarily get, even if Darnold is seemingly projected as the more risky player, that's 8 more. I don't think all the fumbles are necessarily turnovers, but I think putting the ball on the ground, he's definitely been a more turnover prone player this year than Sam Darnold, which is interesting because Darnold definitely makes more kind of over the middle big time throws, I think, than Kirk Cousins makes.
That is interesting because we knew when he was at his best and most comfortable, he was not a super turnover prone quarterback. He fumbled a lot. I remember when he came to Minnesota, he was always somebody who fumbled a lot, but O'Connell had worked to get that interception total down. So if he's throwing 4 picks like he did against the Chargers, who were a good defense, but man, that's the kind of game that they got to win. And I guess it will be interesting to see how the fans react to him in large. I do think there will be a smattering that boo him. I do think there will be a lot of people who would like to see the Vikings show him up in this game, but
sure. Yes.
After 6 years, I guess I wouldn't be shocked if there is some kind of, welcoming of him because he was obviously by the end of it, Mike, you remember when he first came here in 2018 compared to when he left, a total night and day change from like, it was, you were the guy who got paid, you better win us everything. And then why didn't this work out? It's all your fault. To then all of a sudden by the end of it, it's Kirk O'Chains. He's this cult hero. So yeah, it was quite the arc for him in Minnesota.
Didn't he do the Gallahorn shirtless? Did he do that?
I think he did after the ACL or the Achilles tear. Yep.
After the Achilles tear. Yeah. So, yeah. Yep. So maybe that's what's making me think he'll get a nice reception. But of course, they want to beat him. So we'll see. A lot to be sorted out before Sunday's game.